Sorry Day, can you just take people, for those who aren't 100% sure, a lot of stuff is written about Sorry Day, and there's references to Kevin Rudd and the apology, and sometimes, again, it gets a little bit, I suppose, lost, and people go on autopilot. Can we just get a little understanding about what Sorry Day is about?
Yeah, and on this day in 1997, the report on the stolen generation was presented to government, and then 12 months later was the first Sorry Day. Right, and it was the apology was wonderful from the then Prime Minister, but it is saying sorry basically for that hurt and that occurred, and we see it now also with the ongoing trauma that people have found within their families. If I can just put you into context with my family, for example, many of my uncles and aunts had difficulty identifying as being Indigenous, right, on the basis that their mother, my grandmother, who was a full-blood Yorta Yorta woman, she said to them, whatever happens, deny that you are Aboriginal, run away because they'll take you away, right? And then about in the early 80s, I found out one of my cousins was from the stolen generation. She's a wonderful, wonderful woman, lives in Sydney not far from me, and she didn't realise that she was Aboriginal and had been taken at birth as a part of the stolen generation, right? And it took her 40 years to find her way back into the family. She was the daughter of my eldest aunt, and it was just so wonderful. But the impact on her was just incredible. And you'll find that there is a lot of reference to the trauma that families are still undergoing from that time. It reverberates down. So I think people just need to take a bit of time to reflect on those particular issues. But I think that's just enough. I could go on for a little while on that, but it is very, very important to recognise that, and hence Sorry Day.
Yeah. Why had children had to be taken away?
Sure. I think before we skip to why children were taken away, we have to consider, and Sorry Day for me considers a whole lot of policies intended for our own good, but policies that have impacted us. As Steve rightly mentioned, Sorry Day highlights the intergenerational trauma on the stolen generations, but I go back further, and let's talk about policies related to dispossession and how lands were taken away for Aboriginal people. Let's then talk about a generation on from that, and that's my great-grandfather. And so he had policies that wanted to segregate him from communities, exemption certificates and so on. Then another generation on is my mum, I beg your pardon, it's my nan. So she was in an era where after assimilation, segregation and protection, she was taken away from her families, removed and worked as a maid. Another generation on is my mum, who spent life on the run because her skin colour was just a little bit too white. So those policies, assimilation, protection, removal, exemptions, all intended for our own good as people, have intergenerational impacts, as does the policy that did remove and separated families, tore them from their lands, separated them from their families, and has left the legacy of intergenerational impacts that we see today. Higher rates of incarceration, health problems, the data and statistics. We don't have to rehearse what it is. We know the disparity exists. And so for me, when I look at why we're sorry, I know individuals were not responsible, but this is the impact of policies where there has been no Indigenous voice within those decisions that impact us. You know the old saying, nothing about us without us? Well, they're those policies. They're those things that impact us. The stolen generations have left horrific intergenerational trauma that we still see today. And so that's to me what the guts of Sorry Day is. That's what the experiences that our people before us have endured. And so it's a look at that holistic picture of the absence of a voice in policies that have impacted us over time and through time.
Okay. And just thank you for that. We will cover the voice in a bit of detail later on. Obviously, it's a burning issue across the country. So, but in terms of, because I still find it extraordinary when I look at my own experiences, things that you think happened hundreds of years ago only happened 30, 40 years ago. When I was a teenager, I didn't realise in Ireland, unmarried mothers were put into what was called laundries and their children taken from them. And that was up until the 1990s. I had gone through university, I was in my first job, and these things happened only 30 years ago. With the stolen generations, can I just understand why did somebody think it was a good idea to take Indigenous children away from their families? What was the basis for that?
Oh, look, it's a very divisive issue. A lot of people thought it was the right thing to do, and there is another. These are white people.
Yeah.
Right? The other issue was that there was the intent to, if you want, breed out the black side within the family, because you could be a better person because you were white. I think they're called the cards that were issued, the exclusion cards, or
the exemption certificates. That's what I talked about with my great-grandfather.
These were ridiculous into the 60s, and it hit home to me when I went back to country and I went into the museum, and there was the card. I'd show you the card in there. And it was quite specific in there that what the rules were, right? You couldn't associate with other Aboriginal people. You couldn't talk language, right? And the cutting comment down the bottom was, and if you adhere to these, you too could be treated like a white man, right? And this was the card into the early 60s. Right, and just happens this is one of my mob down in Echuca, and I sort of looked at it and I thought, this is just amazing. And I actually had a poster on my wall and said, that's the past. And next to that I had, fortunately things have changed now, it was one of my young cousins dressed up in traditional possum skin and so forth, and doing dance and playing the didgeridoo, and that was the future. And it was quite amazing.